Sundays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God, help us all. If you fail to prove us wrong, God, help us.
One trillion species, 7.8 billion humans, 1.9 million species extinct. One planet. Where are we heading? What should we do?
Watch Climate Tracker, only on WION. World is one.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching WION Climate Tracker with me, Molly Gambhir. Before we get started, a quick look at what's lined up for you on the show. Afghanistan has been reeling under back-to-back natural disasters. After the heat wave drought and a massive earthquake, Afghanistan has been hit by deadly flash floods. At least 20 people have lost their lives. 35 have been injured in the last 48 hours. But the unofficial reports put the toll at much higher. Thousands of homes have been swept away, agricultural lands have been destroyed, and the Taliban authorities have been struggling to cope with the disasters. They have called for assistance from neighboring countries and the international community. According to the Deputy Minister of Disaster Management, emergency food assistance has been dispatched to many flood-affected areas, and aid organizations have promised to deliver emergency assistance, but it may not be enough. Global humanitarian agencies have provided assistance for months now, but time and again they have warned that they needed more access and funding to avoid a humanitarian disaster, with thousands left homeless and without access to shelter or clean drinking water. Afghanistan's Deputy Minister of Disaster Management has called on the aid organizations to help the country with not only emergency assistance like food, shelter and medicine, but also to help over the longer term, since many people have lost their homes, livelihood and drinking water sources. Afghanistan has recently been hit by a series of natural disasters and extreme weather events, including an earthquake in June that killed more than 1,000 people. The ongoing flash floods have killed at least 90 people in a span of 10 days. The deaths have occurred across 10 provinces as the country reels from an economic and humanitarian crisis, worsened by the Western sanctions imposed after the Taliban returned to power last year. Let's now move across to the United States, where heavy rainfall and flash floods hit the southern state of Texas, affecting the capital city the worst. Rainfall continued for over 24 hours and finally ended on Monday night. The downpour broke all forecasts by the meteorological officials. One area in eastern Dallas experienced more than 15 inches of rainfall, and according to the government, at least one person has died. A 60-year-old woman was declared dead after her vehicle was swept away by the rising water. A county judge has declared a state of disaster in the Dallas County. This triggered a request for state and federal assistance, and in a tweet, asked the residents to report their damage to the Texas Division of Emergency Management.
I got a hold of them and they come and rescued me. It took them about half hour to figure out how to do it. It was the current so strong going past my house, it'll wash you away.
Aerial visuals of the affected areas showing some residents wading through waist-high water. Numerous roads remained closed due to flooding. The police warned the motorists to avoid driving in high waters. The National Weather Service has said in a statement that flood warnings will continue in some parts of Dallas. Risks of thunderstorms and short spells of heavy rain are possible till Wednesday. The heavy rain in the Dallas area and across the southern plains being the latest examples of the extreme weather events in the United States. And this year, the country has witnessed a series of dangerous floods, tornadoes, wildfires and heat waves. While in some parts these weather events were common, scientists have concluded that climate change has intensified each one of them. The intensity and impact and duration of the summer season in China broke all records. Amid the long-running heat wave, the country declared a nationwide drought alert last week. The Poyang is the largest freshwater lake in China. On your screen are two satellite images. The left one is from 4 months ago, in April, when it covered nearly 4,000 square kilometers. And on the right is what things look like today. It barely covers 600 square kilometers, which is about 67% smaller than a 10-year average. This lake is called China's kidney because of how crucial it is when it comes to supplying water. The Poyang Lake is not alone. Almost every water body in the country has a similar story to tell. The Yangtze is the world's third longest river, providing drinking water to more than 400 million Chinese people. It is the most vital waterway to one of the leading economies in the world, but this summer it has reached record low water levels, with entire sections and dozens of tributaries drying up. Water flow on the Yangtze's main trunk is more than 50% below the average of the last 5 years. And the loss of water flow means trouble for hydropower systems, and this has sparked a grave situation in Sichuan, which gets more than 80% of its energy from hydropower. Over the weekend, the government declared it was at the highest warning level, with water flow to Sichuan's hydropower reservoirs dropping by half. The heat wave has brought immense misery. It has disrupted the entire chain effect. Let me tell you how. Water bodies are shrinking due to widespread drought, which means water flow is incredibly low at plants creating electricity, and this further has strained the regions that are dependent on hydropower supply, like Shanghai, which is now taking drastic measures to sustain on meager supply. The famous Skyline lights were switched off. Riverside Bund area and parts of the financial center are in near darkness.
Large cities now consume a lot of electricity. Power generation provinces like Sichuan has been affected by the pandemic, and power generation must have been affected. If our Shanghai government makes such consumption restrictions, it will help ease the supply of electricity.
China remains on a heat red alert for a 12th day today. Temperatures are expected to fall in parts of central China by Wednesday, but the worst is not over. A cold front is looming from the west, and a typhoon is approaching in the southeast. The heat wave has lasted more than 2 months, and in some parts will continue well into September. The world is experiencing the first true global energy crisis in history. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to a global battle over natural gas tankers, further increasing the fuel's record prices. The situation is especially dire in Europe. European countries have ramped up their purchases of liquefied natural gas from the US, Qatar, and other countries this year. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is also bringing Canada and Germany closer together. Canada is seeking to boost energy and critical mineral exports to Germany. On Monday morning, during a 3-day visit, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Russia's brutal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, a sovereign democratic nation, was, as Chancellor Scholz has put it, a watershed moment. But the world has seen the flow of support bend towards justice and peace. Governments around the world have come together to stand with Ukraine and stand against authoritarianism. And the world has put punishing sanctions on Russia, the toughest sanctions ever on a major economy. This has not been easy anywhere, particularly not in Europe, particularly not in Germany. But time and time again, Chancellor Scholz, you've demonstrated the strength of your leadership. Despite immense pressures and some of the most challenging economic and political circumstances imaginable, you are relentlessly defending democracy in Europe and around the world. For that, we say thank you. Merci.
In the last couple of months, our friendship has given us many reasons to be proud. First, our two nations stand together as allies. We are committed to the collective defense of each and every ally. The presence of Canadian and German soldiers in the Baltics is visible evidence of this commitment. Secondly, jointly, we implemented the toughest sanctions regime on Russia, and Putin has not managed to drive a wedge between us, thanks to your wise and courageous decisions. Third, Together, we are about to embark on a journey to reconcile two fields of politics that are still sometimes considered contradictory: energy and climate. It is imperative to drive the green energy transition forward because we must reduce our dependencies and because we want to reach our climate goals.
Meanwhile, Germany fears further reduction of natural gas supplies from Russia this winter as a consequence of Western sanctions. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has also said that Germany is aiming to reach zero carbon emissions by 2045, while Canada wants to decarbonize fully by 2050. By mid-2024, Germany hopes to eliminate its need for Russian gas. The two countries are set to sign what is being called a historic accord that will accelerate so-called green hydrogen and critical minerals exports to Germany. Meanwhile, the glaciers from 5 alpines are predicted to melt in the next 15 years. Our next report telling you more about this.
It's a dire prognosis for Germany's 5 alpine glaciers. Glaciologist of the Bavarian Academy of Sciences shares a doomsday prediction after research. All the glaciers will disappear within the next 15 years. Germany's glaciers are facing particularly tough times compared with neighboring ones.
If you look at all the glaciers in the Alps, then of course you have to say that the situation is a bit different compared with the German glaciers. We have many more. We have around 3,000 glaciers still in the Alps, and there are very few large glaciers in the Alps that will survive for a long time. But it is already the case that the majority of the glaciers in the Alps will disappear in the next 55 years.
Since the records began in 1901, never has the snow depth on the Zugspitz peak been so low in July. The Zugspitz is located on the glacier. Like other glaciers, Germany's highest and largest glacier has been melting dramatically in recent years, and it has lost much of its volume in the past decade. This year's high temperatures and low rainfall have made it especially hard for the glaciers to survive, because the low volume of snow can accelerate the melting of the ice. But it's not hikers that damage the glaciers. It's the Sahara dust cloud, a phenomena down to southwestern winds. The clouds have been carrying sand and dust from the Sahara across Europe, including Germany, since early 2022.
Snow has a very light surface. This means that when the sun shines on the snow, most of the solar energy is reflected and is not used to melt the snow. But if there is dark dust or dark sand on the snow surface, then this sand absorbs. The sun's radiation and the heat that is generated is then transferred directly into the melting of the snow. And this has led to the fact that this spring, the snow cover disappeared relatively quickly, especially on the Bavarian glaciers, where there was actually not such a small layer of snow in contrast with many others.
Reducing greenhouse emissions is the easiest way to slow down the melting of alpine glaciers. But with the Russian war in Ukraine, gas crisis, supply fears, and approaching winter, Germany is turning to coal to save households and cities. Coal, with a carbon content of 78%, makes up the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions, and it means more carbon dioxide being added to the already heated atmosphere. And there's no visible panic or planning in sight. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
As tourists flock to Greenland to take in its breathtaking icebergs and natural beauty, authorities are mulling ways to control crowds to protect the fragile environment, which is already threatened by global warming. Have a look at our next report to find out more.
In Greenland, at the world's end, icebergs and glaciers stretch as far as the eye can see. Here, on the west coast, tourists come to marvel at the Ilulissat Fjord in Disco Bay, a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2004.
Wow, it's wow. I like very, very much the ice. And the sound, no sound. It's quiet. It's amazing.
After the Antarctic, Greenland is home to the world's largest mass of ice, equal to 7 times the size of the United Kingdom. Yet even here, climate change threatens its icebergs and ice flows, and with them the traditions of those who live in the region.
Back when I was young, I can remember we used to have a pack ice where we can walk on it. But now the pack ice is not so solid anymore. You cannot use it for anything. You cannot go dog sled on the ice and fishing like in the old days where people go to this place and fish on the ice. They cannot do it anymore because it's just too dangerous for them to go to this place.
Since the 1980s, the average temperature of the island has risen by 1.5 degrees Celsius each decade, making it one of the fastest warming regions in the world. For the Inuit, the main ethnic group on the island, these rising temperatures have serious consequences for the ecosystem they depend upon. Most locals still rely on fishing to survive, and many shoals of fish are migrating ever further north in search of colder waters.
There are loads of fish here, but the climate is too hot and the fish are very small.
As the region finds itself at the front line of the climate crisis, more and more tourists are flocking to see this glacial world before it dies out. Ilulissat's mayor is happy the town received over 50,000 visitors last year, but he also wants limits on the number of those who come.
One ship max, one day, max 1,000 tourists per ship. We don't want to be like Iceland. We don't want mass tourism. We want a controlled tourism here. We have no capacity to handle so many people here. You must remember that we only are 5,000 people here in Ilulissat.
Ilulissat's Ice Fjord Centre, opened in 2021, is a symbol of that ambition to be a leader in responsible Arctic tourism. The exhibitions mix cultural artefacts with glacier samples. The aim is to draw the visitors' attention to how fragile both the country's nature and the Inuit way of life are.
The ice course here is to show that the importance of what you can read out of the ice when you are interested in trying to figure out how the climate changes over time. We try to make people think of how they can not only be part of the problem but also a part of the solution.
Yet whether they leave with the desire to be part of the solution or not, the island's visitors remain at the heart of an inescapable problem. The greenhouse gases they emit in their travels by plane or by boat directly contribute to the environment's destruction. And according to some scientific estimates, if all the ice that covers Greenland melts, the world's sea levels would rise by over 7 meters.
Meanwhile, the rebel-held Idlib region in Syria is sweltering under extreme heat. Temperatures have touched 50 degrees Celsius and most of the inhabitants in the region live in tents, old, torn and damaged ones, which are extremely vulnerable to heat. But the civilians have found a way to beat the heat. We are leaving you to find out how. Thanks for watching.
I go to work in the morning and come back around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. As soon as I'm back home, I fill the pickup truck with water for them to swim in this heat, as it's too hot inside the tents. It's unbearable. We have no pools where the children can swim. It's a desert area. It's the only way they can swim, to fill the back of the truck with water so they can cool off and not get overheated.
Volunteering in camps in northwestern Syria, where more than 2 million people live in barren areas. The temperature inside the tents reached 50 degrees Celsius. People are literally roasting inside in these soaring temperatures. We, the team of volunteers, try to help by providing them with ice cream and water and splashing the tents and children with water to cool them down.
WION, India's global